Tiger Rag by Art Tatum, again going back from hip-hop into classic jazz. Still crazy after all these years, the Brad Mehldau Trio. Now we're talking about one of the most exciting people in current jazz. And then the one classical selection, the Tarantella from Pulcinella, as played by the Philharmonic, conducted by Boulez, who I know is a mentor of David's, but also an extraordinary conductor of that music. And then Blue as the Turquoise Night of Neshabur by the Silk Road Ensemble, and finally The Boxer by Simon and Garfunkel. This is not, to borrow a hoary old advertising phrase, your father's music director.
Correct.
But he's somebody who he just has a very active musical mind. And it's as active in other forms of music as it is classical. In fact, I've never talked to him about this, but he was interviewed by the music critic of the Los Angeles Times, and in telling how he came up with this, he said that he realized at the last minute that, oh my God, we're an orchestra, I'd better have some classical music. And he had to think what he was going to use. But I think the most important thing is that what you're telling me now, and you're telling people listening, is that this is not hype, this is not just something he does to get attention or does and forgets about. It is who he is, and it informs everything the orchestra does.
He's extremely genuine, and he's also very accessible as a person. I mean, I can go up to him, and I often go up to him and say, you know, is this what you want here? We need to get some players. What do we need in this coming thing? I don't have to go through anyone else. I can go to him directly. That is not always the case for someone who's a lowly section player, to be able to do that. He also will be waiting off stage after a concert to greet the musicians. He does not wait for the patrons. He greets all the musicians as they come off. And he will comment if you've done something really great that night. He's interested in you as a person. The first time I met him, he knew my name. He wasn't music director yet. He knew my name, and he said, "You've written some articles. I'd like to talk to you about those." And I just went, music directors don't know that.
And actually, this is something we should mention here, that you, along with Bob Wagner, bassoonist from the New Jersey Symphony, who I could also make a little link in the air and you could click and listen to his interview, you have done some work about European orchestras that manage themselves or play a role in their management. Berlin was one, Lahti was the other, and maybe we could finish by saying something about the Lahti Symphony in Finland, because we have Fergus to talk about Berlin, so that's represented here. But just in whatever time it takes, say what you learned from studying the Lahti Symphony. I guess Bob did say some things about that, but you say it too.
Well, Lahti was an amazing example of what a group vision achieved. When they started getting together in regular intervals, as Ashma Vanchka puts it, like taking your car for a tune-up or an oil change.
He being their music director.
Yes.
Is he still?
Yes, he is.
Because he's also getting a lot of attention in America as music director of the Minnesota Orchestra.
And this getting together and discussing things, putting ideas out, was something that was begun by one of the musicians in the orchestra who later became the general manager. And in the early years of this, they created a strategic vision. They were an orchestra then, I believe, of 37, 38 players. They played in a church, not the best acoustics. So they had a vision of doing international touring, doing award-winning recording, of having a concert hall, I believe even they went as far to say on the waterfront, and of having a freeway that went to Lahti from Helsinki, because up till then it hadn't been that easy to get to Lahti. And Lahti is a town of 100,000. It is not what we would consider a major Finnish city. Although in Finland, yes, that's a large city. In 15 years, I believe, they achieved all of those goals. They have an incredible concert hall on the waterfront in Lottie. It is gorgeous. They have an orchestra, I believe it's of 70-some players. They have a number of recordings, many of which have won our equivalent of Grammys. And they do international touring. And they do have the freeway.
And so a question to ask you, maybe to wind this up, is what got you interested in studying things like that, in leaving the confines of the clarinet section of the St. Louis Symphony and going out into the world to find out other things that were going on?
I was pretty much forced into it. I was physically disabled from playing.
Oh, yeah.
And I took that as an opportunity to enter the American Symphony Orchestra League Orchestra Management Fellowship Program. And then from there, when I was able to go back from playing, I decided that our knowledge, particularly the musicians' knowledge of what was going on elsewhere, was really woefully inadequate. And with funding from the Mellon Foundation, they sponsored my research into European orchestras and American orchestras, including a number of self-governing or co-op orchestras, you would say, in America. Mm. And it's been fascinating and life-changing. Mm.
Because obviously it informs everything you've been saying here. Although you must have had some of that spirit in advance, otherwise you probably would not have found it. Do you think that orchestras possibly should make it possible for their musicians to explore things like this without becoming physically disabled, from which you clearly recovered?
I think personal growth is a very important thing for a musician. Now that personal growth can include musical growth. It can include things outside of music, skills that become highly applicable and that bring a greater depth that you can bring to your music making. And I definitely think it should be encouraged. In some cases, I think requiring it would be a wonderful thing. And I don't, in effect, I don't want to limit what it looks like, because I think for everyone it would look different. But it is that ability to experiment, that ability to look elsewhere, to do things differently, that enables an excitement to be present.
Something that maybe we don't think of all that much. Every member of an orchestra, every musician, is an artist.
Yes.
And because of that, they have their own process of artistic growth. And it seems to me that we may not have thought enough as orchestras, as crucibles for the development of the artistic growth of their members. Instead, it's become something like a factory where the member's job is to turn out the product, which is the performances of the pieces. But the orchestra would certainly be a warmer, more human, and more inviting institution if it were made up of the separate artists working together, but also in their own ways.
I know of no other performing art where you stop being coached and being encouraged to grow when you get your job than in orchestras.
Or as the concertmaster of one notable American orchestra said, definition of tenure, you can stop practicing.
Very sad.
Yeah. But St. Louis is not in that spot.
No.
We hope. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
This is terrific.